You are now listening to the Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network.
Hello there, everyone, and welcome back to The Disconnected. If you are new here, I'd like to introduce myself a little bit before this one. My name is Ryan Verrill. I am a voracious film consumer, lover of physical media, and vast believer in archiving film and preserving our film history. I really wanted to introduce this one because it is what I'm really feeling is maybe my most important interview on the show to date. I know that may sound sort of self-aggrandizing, but I'm a federal employee at my day job, and considering how much the Library of Congress affects what we preserve and protect for our country, it is a really tough time for people in this sector, I guess is the best way to say that. A lot of things are coming under fire for budget cuts and for removal of things that are known as institutions in the name of removing waste, which is not waste in any way. In fact, much of the situations that are being used to carve out this waste is actually wasting more money than they're saving. So it's not a great time overall, but I really wanted to shout out George Willeman for the time taken to make this conversation special. As you'll notice, there are Christmas lights in this. Yes, it was filmed in December. It has been a long time to get this approved and edited properly and make sure that we are doing right by the Library of Congress. And with such a strong institutional name like the Library of Congress, that comes with quite a few hoops to jump through sometime. I really just wanted to sort of give this the breadth and air that it needs, because this truly does feel like an important time to discuss this. I also want to shout out Oscar Behcer from Vinegar Syndrome. He is the entire reason this interview exists. He was the one that made the introduction here and suggested that I try to interview George, and it's an amazing time for Film Archive, considering people at Vinegar Syndrome are putting their lives behind saving this history. We have people like AGFA putting their money where their mouth is and having one of the largest film archives in the country. And when it comes to the most important, that theoretically should be the Library of Congress. So again, thank you, George. Thank you, Brett, at the Library of Congress, for what we're doing here. So if you're a fan of this, please let other people know, and I hope to see you again in the future. Enjoy. Hello there, and welcome back to The Disconnected, here with George Willeman, who is the Nitrate Vault Manager with the Library of Congress. George, it is a genuine honor to have you on the show. Thanks for coming on here.
Oh, thank you, Ryan. It's great to be here. One little thing, though, and my actual title is Nitrate Film Vault Leader. This was, originally, yes, my old boss always called me manager, and I do. I manage the vault. But because I'm not a supervisor, I'm not permitted to call myself a manager.
Gotta love how the federal workforce works.
At first, I was kind of bummed, but then I was like, wait a minute. Nitrate Film Vault Leader. So the words film leader are in my title. I'm like, yes, I'll take that.
That's a big deal. The other big, for anybody that's not a Fed too, the other big thing is that means a lot less paperwork for you.
That's
when
right.
You don't manage people.
Thankfully, I've seen people destroyed by paperwork. So
it is a terrible, daunting situation to be in. I would love to not be a manager, but here I am. I am thrilled to have you for a multitude of reasons, but one of the biggest is this is, one of the biggest archives in the world. We have so many film reels that are housed in the Library of Congress that, we could literally just geek out over individual things for the next 7 hours, I'm sure. I am genuinely honored to hear from somebody that has been there. 40th year this year, is that right?
Years, yes. On December 18th, I get to go up to D.C., and they're having a length of service thing, and from what I understand, I get a clock.
I don't think I've heard that one. Nice.
So I'm looking for. Hopefully the clocks didn't get lost in the last budget, and I'll get like a Dunkin' Donuts coupon. But I'm hoping I will get a clock. Yes.
Maybe they gave away the last one in November. We'll see. 40 years doing this is a big deal. Not only for just the level of knowledge that you have amassed over that time, but the evolution of not only the digital aspect, but literally of the materials you're handling.
Oh, yeah.
So I would love to just start off with what do you actually do with the Library of Congress, which is documented well everywhere. So I recommend people go check out, just go search up George Willeman and spend a day going through that archive.
Well, I am in charge of the Nitrate Film Collection. And for those who may not know about nitrate film is a film stock that was used from the beginning of cinema up to about 1950. It's a great film stock. It's still a great film stock. You know, we have negatives that are 115, 120 years old. We can still use them. They're still soft. They're still supple. They can still be run through printers. They can still be scanned. And it's a good, strong film stock. I mean, it was designed to take abuse. And that's one of the reasons it stayed in use for so long, is that the safety film that was made at the same time, the body was very weak. The base could not take being shown over and over and over and over. And one thing I really didn't realize is in the early days, you see pictures of theaters and it says, continuous show. And I didn't realize that what that meant was, you know, when the projectionist got there in the morning, he would start up the projector and he'd start running his show of, you know, trailers and shorts and 2 features and serial and whatever. And as soon as the last film was done, he would immediately start with the first one again. So he would run his projectors all day, never shutting them down, and run those films every day continuously until the theater closed. So there was no break. Except maybe the film would break. So yeah, if you had a popular title, you'd be running it, 7-8 times a day for several weeks.
Wow.
So you had to have a film stock that could take a lot of abuse, and nitrate is such film stock. Now we have ester-based film stock, polyester film. It can also take a lot of abuse, and it hands out a lot of abuse to machinery. I've heard stories where polyester-based prints have jammed in the projector, and rather than break, they have pulled the projector off their base. That's how strong polyester film is.
Wow.
So basically, like I said, we have I'm in charge of the Nitrate Film Collection. And what that is we have about 150,000 reels of nitrate film dating from about 1896 to 1950. 51. We have the largest single collection of original studio negatives. That's our big thing.
Yeah.
When the library started this whole process back in the 60s, it was when the realization was that a lot of films were being lost. There wasn't an interest in them at the time. There was no home video. They were all black and white, and color was becoming more prevalent, so the interest in old black and white movies wasn't there. But somebody at the Library of Congress, bless them, understood the value of this stuff and started approaching the studios. The first one is RKO, and the basic thing would be, if you will let us hold your negatives and copy them to the National Collection, we will store them for you at no cost.
It's a big deal for a studio.
It is big, because nitrate film storage has always been very, very expensive, not only because the vaults are specially constructed and air conditioned, but also, insurance costs are quite high. Because the one thing I didn't mention, of course, the most interesting aspect of nitrate film is that it's very, very flammable. The plastic base used in nitrate is a plastic version of gun cotton. It's nitrocellulose. So it's cotton mixed with nitric acid, and they stabilize it a lot. So it is not shock sensitive, although everyone thinks it is, which actually kind of works for us. We like people to think we're scary. But it is very, very flammable, and that's why a lot of it has been lost over the years. And not only is it flammable, but it also tends to deteriorate as the nitric acid leaches out of the film, which is a natural part of the aging process of it. It basically eats itself and eventually turns into a fine, nasty brown powder, and by that point, there's nothing you can do with it. We've actually just come across some of these recently, and we're starting to dig through them and see if they are salvageable, and if they aren't, then we have to get rid of them. And then that's a whole nother process.
Right.
Because now it's no longer nitrocellulose historic film, it's hazardous waste. So we get to deal with it from that aspect.
As somebody who's a Fed myself, I can't imagine the amount of hazmat training you've had to go over through 40 years.
Yeah, every year. We just finished spill training. We have nitrate handling training. We have shipping training every year. And then the area where we work, the vaults and the workroom, are a Class 1 Division 2 hazardous area. So any electrical devices we take in there have to be intrinsically safe, which gets really interesting because guess what they don't make? They don't make any film handling equipment that is intrinsically safe. They never have.
Right.
So we've had to be very inventive and come up with things to allow us to continue working in the way we're accustomed to, which means finding a light source for our light tables, in which case we got these little light boxes called nightsticks that are made for police work. And we basically chop the lighting units out of our tables. We can slide one of these in and turn it on, and it works fine. It also comes with big sheets of plastic to protect them from blood spatter.
That's pretty good. That's pretty good.
Well, I think, of course, the other issue is that, communication becomes a problem because we don't have a telephone.
Right.
We don't have telephones back in the vaults. So we came with the idea, the library has an iPhone system, but we can't take an iPhone back in there because iPhones are not intrinsically safe.
Of course.
But they can be made intrinsically safe. So our iPhones are wrapped in a special case, just a fancy heavy-duty case with a big sticker on the back that says it's intrinsically safe. Okay. It says, approved for use in a Class 1 Division 2 space.
Wow.
And getting that case with that sticker on it is over $700 for the
each,
case.
I'm assuming.
Yes, each. We have 4 of them. So there's 4 of us that work up there. But that has been an absolute godsend for us because now we have our safety communication. So, if I'm back in the vault and I've fallen and I can't get up, I can call for help. We can take pictures now because it's got a camera, of course. It's got a flashlight. And most important of all, we can play music so we don't go mad. Because the one thing I've discovered over 40 years is when you're back in a cold film vault and the only sound you hear is the air conditioning running, it can really get you after a while. So,
especially after the 7th hour.
Yeah, I have Pandora and I have my music and I can listen to it. It's really great. Now, of course, I don't have earbuds or anything like that because they're not particularly safe. So everybody gets to listen to my music.
Well, I mean, you're the senior. I would hope you get to choose it.
Yeah, I do. I let them choose. I don't force them to listen to anything.
Well,
that's been an interesting situation that we've had to overcome.
I imagine. For people that are watching this that can't quite grasp the scope, when we're just saying words like largest, you have to have a memorized list of superlatives for this place. I mean, there was one talk you did a few years ago that mentioned like 90 miles of shelves. Is that still semi-accurate?
That's definitely accurate. It's not just, I think that probably is everybody. That's because Nitrate is just one small corner of the facility. The place, I should say, that where I work is called the National Audio-Visual Conservation Center. And it's built inside a mountain in Culpeper, Virginia. And it was originally a Federal Reserve facility built as an anti-nuclear contingency site for when the Ruskies dropped the bomb on Washington. And more I think about the original site, and I actually got the chance to see it before they redid everything. You know that building that Dr. Strangelove talks about at the end of that movie?
Of course.
That was what it was. There were even dormitories with beds for 200 or 300 people. So that actually was a real thing. And it actually did open about the same time that movie came out. So the idea of it was, they stored enough cash there to keep the government going in case Washington was destroyed. And then they could move certain members of the government who were deemed absolutely necessary down there. And they could go in the building, big shutters would come down and seal the building, and then it could run itself for 2 years while they waited for the fallout to go down outside.
I love places like this, and I probably shouldn't say too much about it, but in the town I live in, through the agency that I currently work for, we have in the side of a mountain one of the biggest archives of federal records, and literally I've worked in there. We call it the caves, and people don't understand. Like you will come around a corner, and there is literally the side of a mountain in this facility, and on one side is this rock wall that you can touch that's bulging out at you, and the other side is cubicles, and it's the oddest work environment, but it's so neat that this is literally one of the most protected areas for miles. This is incredible.
The original building now at Culpeper is now where we store everything but nitrate. This is where they store safety film, video, recorded sound items. And you can't see any of the mountainside anymore. You used to be able to. When we first visited, there was a little access panel inside the bathroom that had been built for the dormitories. And we opened it up, and there was a huge cavern behind the building. It went the entire length of the building. I actually have a picture of it somewhere. It was enormous. And I finally asked them, what's with this cave? And they said, well, that side of the building faces Washington, D.C. So that when the bomb is dropped and the shock wave comes rolling across the Shenandoah Valley and hits that side of the mountain, the cave will crush and keep the building from being pushed out the other side of the mountain.
I love that they planned for everything.
Exactly, yeah.
Gosh, there's so much to go down with you. I don't even know where to start. But the big thing... Go ahead.
I was going to say, let's go back. We were talking about what we have in nitrate, okay?
Yes.
Talk about some of the things we have in nitrate, since that's sort of my area of expertise. We have the largest single collection of studio negatives. And what that means, like I said, we started out with the RKO collection. That was our first one in the mid-'60s. And then the next one after that, we have Columbia. And Columbia Pictures is our largest single collection. We have pretty much everything that survives that Columbia Pictures made from the late 20s up to about 1950-51. So that means all of Capra's films that he made for Columbia are there. All the Three Stooges up to 1950, plus all their hundreds of serials. I mean, Columbia not only ground out many serials of their own, but as little studios went out of business, they bought up their serials. So Columbia also owns a lot of Republic serials.
Right.
I believe they own the entire output of Mascot Studios, so they have all the Mascot serials. Shorts, they had one of the busiest shorts divisions of any of the studios, and so we have probably 10 vaults of nothing but shorts.
Wow.
Other than the Three Stooges. And these are shorts on every subject: sports, popular interest shorts, music, travelogues, you name it. There was one, I remember one of the ones that caught my eye. There's a short called Babies by Bannister. And I'm like, can you actually show this in a public theater? Well, it turns out there was a very famous baby photographer named Connie Bannister. And to this day, her baby pictures are still seen on greeting cards. They're lovely pictures. She had really great ability to capture these toddlers in cute poses.
Nice.
And so this is a whole film, and I'm surprised I should probably work at getting it more seen. Unfortunately, it's still under copyright by Sony. But it's about how she does her art, how she sets up and takes pictures of infants. Not as exciting as it probably could have been, but there you go.
It's the previous generation's Ann Geddes, or
exactly.
Yeah. Interesting.
So Columbia, like I said, Columbia is our big one, and this year, they're putting out this big 100th anniversary set of just Capra. So they've been borrowing stuff from us and put out. Yes, exactly that one. I've got that on my Christmas list. So after Columbia, the next thing we got was the United Artists television collection. UATV had purchased Warner Brothers library, so that meant we got all the Warner Brothers negatives up to about 1950. And again, it was all their features and all their shorts and a good portion of Merry Melody cartoons in both black and white and color. We did not get the Looney Tunes. They're somewhere else. But we did get the Popeye cartoons, the Flesher
nice.
Popeyes.
Yeah.
Because at the time that the library got the collection, UATV was the distributor through AAP of Popeye. So Warner Brothers now owns the Popeye negatives, which is why they put out those fancy box sets a few years ago.
Yeah.
So the cool thing about Warner Brothers is, of course, we have all the classic features, Gold Diggers are 33 and Treasure Sierra Madre and Robin Hood, and you name it, any Warner Brothers feature. We do not have Convention City. Don't ask, we don't have it. The shorts were a really interesting story. From what I've been told, and it's one of these apocryphal legends in our area, when the library took over the UATV collection, we were not supposed to get the shorts. These were shorts that were made by the Vitaphone Corporation, and they are some of the earliest talkie shorts, going back to 1926. Amazingly enough, somebody at wherever they were storing this material for UATV decided they couldn't bear to, these shorts were slated for destruction. But whoever it was could not bear the thought of these films being lost, and he went ahead and sent them to the library. And are we glad he did, because there are so many shorts in there that have just become priceless. It's like the first filmed appearance of George Burns and Gracie Allen doing their stage routine. And that's the big thing about the Vitaphone Corporation. shorts is because they were based in New York, and they're getting started, and they're like, we got to make sound films,
Right.
get people into the idea of having these talking pictures. We're in New York. We've got all these actors. We've got all these vaudeville theaters doing stuff. So they would start going out, and they started calling in these people, hey, come and do your act for us. Come and do your act for us. So the history of American vaudeville pretty much is preserved in our vaults by accident, almost.
Wow.
And these have been put out, too. Warner Archive has put out these wonderful Vitaphone sets.
Oh, yeah.
And some of the stuff, there's a pair of comics named Shaw and Lee, who were totally forgotten until their short was uncovered and the soundtrack was found. Because the one problem with the Vitaphone shorts, the early ones especially, is they don't have any sound. They were disc sound. And the discs are lost. And they're slowly uncovering the discs. And they found the disc for Shaw and Lee, and they put it back together, and they showed it. And it is, if you haven't seen it, look it up. It is one of the funniest shorts I have ever seen in my life. These guys, their timing is so wonderful, and they're such unusual comics. Oh, man. And they did 2 or 3 different shorts, and it's funny to watch their shorts as they progress, because as they become more popular for their shorts, the quality of their shorts goes down.
That's surprising.
Their stage routine is absolutely priceless, and the second one is really good, too. The third one actually has a story, and it's like, but that first one is absolutely wonderful. So we have the Warner Brothers collection through UATV, and now it has reverted back to Warner Brothers because they, through different sales and Ted Turner, like that. So Warner Brothers has their own material back. Warner Brothers also owns the RKO collection now. So so in that one, which I mentioned earlier, we have the negatives to things like Citizen Kane and Hunchback of Notre Dame and all the Val Lutons, which we're working on right now. Criterion has just put out their first Val Luton, which I've heard is really, really nice.
It is,
And let's see what else we have. The Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers. And probably the newest thing we have in the RKO collection is the negative of The Thing.
Oh.
And the interesting thing about that, and I caused a bit of controversy some years ago, because in an interview, I talked about how, we talk about nitrate deterioration, which we'll get to in a minute, and the negative of The Thing is deteriorating. And we've lost a couple reels of it already. The problem with The Thing is when it was made was during the time of changeover from nitrate to triacetate safety film. Right. So the negative of The Thing is both. There are parts that are nitrate, and there's parts that are safety. And wherever the 2 different film stocks are spliced together, they're destroying each other. They're not.
Oh, no. Right.
So, but not to worry. They have, The Thing is taken care of. They when I said that, within like 6 weeks, they called us and said, send us a negative of The Thing. So they preserved that. They found other fine grain material to preserve it as well. And it's looking pretty good too now.
Excellent.
And then, of course, 2 more collections we have. 2 other big ones. Universal. We have only a portion of Universal's collection. They still maintain a lot of it out in Hollywood. But what we have the original camera negatives of Frankenstein and Dracula and some of the Abbott and Costellos. And we have the negative to the Spanish Dracula.
Oh, wow.
Have you seen the Spanish Dracula? I'm sure.
I don't think I've ever seen the full thing, but I've seen big clips, yeah.
It's quite amazing. And for those of you out there, if you have not taken the time to watch the Spanish Dracula, it's amazing just to see how another director puts Todd Browning in his place. I mean, I just love the story that, they hired George Melford, who sadly is not well known now, but was an excellent director, associate of Cecil B. DeMille's. They hired him to do the Spanish version. And of course they said, okay, we're going to let you watch all of Browning's dailies and you just copy what he's doing.
Right.
Sure. Any director worth their salt is not going to just copy someone else. I can just see Melford sitting there looking at these dailies going, I can do better than that.
Yep.
Yes, I can do better. So it's so much fun to watch because in every scene he one-ups Todd Browning to the point of figuring out how to get Dracula out of his coffin without having to clumsily pan away to a window and come back. So the first time I saw it, I'm like, this is brilliant. The only problem I have with the Spanish Dracula is Carlos Villarreal, who plays Dracula, was told to play it like Lugosi. So it's like someone doing a really bad Spanish Bela Lugosi imitation. I feel bad for him because he looks perfect for the part. He's perfect for the part, but he's just a little too hammy. for his own good. Now, finally, the one of the really major collections, and every time we tell people, when we have visitors, we tell them about that, they always get really excited, is we have the original nitrate negatives of the Walt Disney Company. So what that means is we have the negatives to Snow White and Fantasia, all the way up through, I think Cinderella was the last thing they did in nitrate. So we have the negatives, and these are Technicolor negatives, which, for those of you who don't know, Technicolor negatives are actually black and white. There was no color involved in Technicolor until they printed them. So we have those. We also have stuff that they never finished because Disney hung on to everything.
Oh, yeah.
So we have several cartoons that were started but never finished. We have the soundtracks to them. We have the little bit of negative to the Dailey film that was going to be part of the follow-up to Fantasia that they finally did finish some years ago. What's that thing called? I can never remember the title of it.
Me neither, but yeah, I remember seeing it come out.
Baseball.
Yeah.
And the negative, the original negative, because they started shooting it, and then Roy Disney saw how much it was going to cost and said,
"Yep."
The original negative is like this long. That's it. They finished like 20 feet of it, and they finally said, "Okay, we can't afford this." But we still have it. We still have it. So yeah, so that's quite impressive, and we love to tell people, when you see the ads from Disney that say "From the Disney Vaults," well, there they are. They're in the back of our place here in Culpeper.
That's a nice claim to fame.
Yeah,
you are the Disney Vaults.
Disney is, Disney's great with their collection. They actually pay for 2 people to maintain their collection. That is their main job with us. And when they're not doing that, they work on other projects for us. But their main job there is to take care of, to inspect the Disney nitrate, report any issues, pull it and ship it when it needs to be sent out to Los Angeles, that kind of thing. So Disney is really serious about taking care of their films, and we thank them for that.
Fascinating. Do any of the other studios do anything like that?
Yeah, Warner Brothers, actually. Warner Brothers has hired 2 people to maintain their collection, and their collection is not only nitrate, but we have a lot of Warner Brothers safety. So these folks maintain the 2 collections, and we've started them working up in the nitrate vaults on the Warner Brothers stuff, because a lot of times Warner Brothers will call for things to be shipped for new scanning, especially 4K scanning, and we ship them out to Hollywood. So we'll have the Warner Brothers people do that, so that my colleague and I, because there's only 2 of us that work in nitrate. There's myself and my associate, Courtney Holshoe, and we take care of the majority of the collection, just the 2 of us. So to get a little bit of assistance with the Warner Brothers collection, we weren't going to say no.
Yeah, that's huge. That's impressive. Let's talk about that shipping. And one thing I'm going to say, linked in the description below for everybody that's listening or watching this later, there is a really impressive, almost half-hour documentary that came out from Gravitas Docufilms called Lost Forever, The Art of Film Preservation, that you were a part of. And it is
still one of my favorites.
It's literally one of the most engaging pieces about film preservation that I've ever seen. It probably is the most engaging, and it's exciting.
Now, if you can find it, that was actually a short film they made after they made a full-length documentary called These Amazing Shadows, which is mainly about the National Film Registry. But they came and they did that, and then afterwards they got to thinking, well, a lot of people may not know more about the history of whys and wherefores. So they had me come back and narrate that one, the short one that's there on YouTube, as sort of an addendum or an appendix to These Amazing Shadows. Which, if you get a chance to see it, it's a little dated now because we did it back in like 2011, but it's a really good film, and lots of interesting people in it, and me. So I would highly recommend seeing that. I know that it's no longer available on DVD, but it may be on YouTube now as well.
Well, one of the things that is important, and you just alluded to it, is shipping things for Disney and Warner Brothers. There are, obviously the nitrate that we're talking about is highly flammable. It's not necessarily like if it gets jostled, it's not going to, burst into flames because of that. However, if there's an ignition source, so all of this, you're literally shipping hazardous materials. It's highly dangerous. How do we go about doing that and keeping these in the best of shape in 2024?
For shipping, we have an interesting system, and there are rules set up for it. There's IATA. I don't know if you're familiar with IATA, IATA, which is International Air Transport Association. Have developed shipping rules for nitrate film by itself, and we follow those because we ship mainly by air, and then we use FedEx as our shipper. So every can of film, and then we have 2 sizes of film cans. We have 1,000 foot, which are about this big, and then 2,000-foot ones, which are about this big. And each can of film goes in its own special tested cardboard package. It's a wrapper. It actually wraps around and seals with tape, and we call them pizza boxes because that's what they look like when you close them. It looks like a pizza box. So every can of film goes in its own pizza box, and then on the front of the pizza box goes a big red and white striped triangle that says flammable solid, and then there's a legend at the top saying, film nitrocellulose base UN 1324, which is the official number for that. And at the bottom there's a big seal saying that this box has been drop tested so that we know it can safely ship nitrate. Now, usually what we're shipping are features, or multiple reels. So we have special overpacks, which are basically a cardboard box. But since it's not tested, we can't actually call it a shipping box. It's an overpack. So
Right.
the shipping boxes go in the overpack, and that way we can, if we have an 8-reel feature, we can put the entire feature in this one overpack and keep them together. So they would have to. Otherwise, we would have to create shipping papers for every individual reel,
Which would be intense.
which would be ridiculous. I won't do it because it becomes with FedEx, and thankfully we have a system that FedEx developed that is an app that is on our computers, and it allows us just to input all the data, weights and measures and stuff like that, and then it automatically spits out the shipper's declaration of dangerous goods, which is this paperwork that is required to go along with the shipment that says what's in it, what it is, how much it weighs, what's dangerous about it, that kind of thing. So we've got this system all worked out. It's quite intense because one little mistake can cause the shipment to be bumped back, and of course we have to pay for it either direction. And not so much for us being a government entity, but for private individuals, if you make a mistake on the paperwork, the fines now are, I think, up to like something in the area of $20,000 per violation per day. So we're very careful. We
I would hope so.
we do very well with it. Like I said, when you're talking about nitrate not being shock sensitive, I can tell you for 40 years of working with it, if nitrate was shock sensitive, I would not be here talking. When I think of the cans of film I have dropped, it's
Right.
it's shameful. But no, nitrate film is incredibly stable. It really is.
Right.
It's just if you get like you said, a source of ignition, a match, like a pilot light on a water heater. I think that's been a
Right.
case of thing like that. But every one of the major nitrate fires that has occurred, they've always found a source of ignition. So it's never been just something just sits there and it blows up. There's always something that sets it off.
Right.
And it's usually, and this can get into why we store the nitrate, because you want to know how we keep it safe into the 21st century. As I said earlier, one of the big problems with nitrate is this nitric acid gas that it gives off. And it does it from the time it's created, because like I said, nitrate film is cotton and nitric acid. They pour the nitric acid over the cotton, it breaks down the bonds, liquefies it, and then they can add different stabilizers to it and spread it out, and it dries into all sorts of different things. You can, you got, well, to this day, guitar picks, ping pong balls, those are made of nitrocellulose. Compound W is a collodion. It's nitrocellulose. If you find like celluloid collars, those are nitrocellulose. You see a lot of toiletry kits, toiletry sets that look like ivory. And those are all nitrocellulose. And yes, you can put a match to them and they'll burn slowly. But with nitrate film, because of the breakdown from nitric acid, it creates this gas. The gas is very heavy. It's like gasoline fumes. And it's very, very flammable. That's when there's a nitrate fire, it's not the film that's burning. It's the gas that is giving off. So if an archive or a vault is not being maintained properly, and this has happened in the past, and nitric acid gas is allowed to build up to a certain level, you'll get a flashback. And that's all she wrote. But our vaults were a brand new design when we opened in 2007, and they were the first of their kind. And the design was so good that when UCLA built their new nitrate vaults, they followed our design. So there's a set of nitrate vaults out in California that look exactly like ours. Same shelving and everything. And so one of the big things we have is this HVAC system that, first of all, keeps the vaults at 37 degrees Fahrenheit all the time. But also what it has is it pumps the air out of every single vault 100% every few minutes. So there is absolutely no way that nitric acid gas can build up. It's being constantly pumped out into the atmosphere. And to that end, nitrate film has a very distinct smell. Actually, it has several distinct smells depending on what condition it's in. But if it's in really good condition, it's got a very earthy smell to it. Not a bad smell. I kind of, my nerdy nitrate way. It's very
been living in it for 40 years.
Very comforting, right? It's kind of earthy, woodsy. Sometimes certain ones actually kind of have a bittersweet chocolate odor to them. I mean, they're very organic. They're cotton. Right. When they go bad, then they smell like wet dogs or dirty gym shoes, and then you got trouble. Right. But where the heck was I going with it? I know what it is. We were talking about pumping the gas out of the vault.
Pumping the gas out, yeah.
When our system in the vaults is shut down, and I notice this immediately because you go in the vaults, it's quiet. So they're replacing belts or putting new filters on or some kind of maintenance thing. Within 15 minutes or so, you start to smell nitrate. You immediately start smelling nitrate. And the longer the system's off, the stronger it becomes. But as soon as they turn the system back on, within 5 minutes, it's gone. It's all pumped out again. So that's one of the big things that keeps the film safe. It keeps the nitric acid from sitting in the cans and the film stewing in their own juices. And it also keeps the nitric acid gas from building up, which eventually will lead to a fire.
Get very dangerous.
And we have a great crew there that maintains the vaults. They check them every couple hours, 24 hours a day. We have both security that will go all the way back and up and back, checking all the doors. And then we have maintenance guys that go up. They check the stuff on the third floor. They're checking the systems which are up in another part of the building to make sure that we stay the living embodiment of the cool, dry place you store things in.
Perfect. You mentioned 2007. I'm sure many people are wondering, and I believe before that was in Ohio at an Air Force base, right?
Yes. The nitrate film collection was stored at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton, Ohio, which, yes, is also where if there are any captured alien spacecraft, they would have been in the same area where we were.
What do you mean if, George? No, I'm just kidding.
That's all I have to say about that. I never saw anything, but I did get to visit a laser lab one time, and some of the things I saw in there made me kind of go, pretty amazing, intense laser devices being worked on in there. So
right.
I was amazed we were allowed to go in it, to tell you the truth. But yeah, we had a building there. They, well, like I said, go back to the 60s, when the library started getting involved with nitrate, it became very apparent that there was going to be a lot of film involved. And there were some nitrate vaults at a federal facility in Suitland, Maryland. There were 3 buildings there that had been there, I think, probably since the war, and they were being used, but they were very small. They could not hold the volume of nitrate that potentially was coming in. So the library started looking for a place to put nitrate, and they went all over the East Coast because they wanted to keep it close to Washington. And one of the places was Iron Mountain up in Pennsylvania, the Saltpeter Caves, that kind of thing. The problem was when they learned that everybody who worked there had to carry a snake bite kit, they were like, no.
Yeah.
Well, it just so happened in 1948, the Air Force had opened a building at Wright-Patterson, Building 167. That number is burned into my head. Building 167 in Area B was built, and it was a film lab and vault. And the purpose of it was they made at least 1 and maybe 2 weekly Air Force-only newsreels that were produced there. And they had everything. They had production facilities, they had editorial, they had processing, they had screening room, and they had vaults. In the late 60s, they closed that project down and moved it out to Edwards Air Force Base. So the building was empty. Somehow the library found out about it. I'm sure they were, talking to different agencies, trying to find a thing. And they said, well, here's these purpose-built nitrate film vaults. The only trick is they're in Dayton, Ohio, which is, about 9 hours from D.C. But it was the price was right. I mean, right. I don't know that we ever actually paid rent, or we just paid, the Air Force gave us a building and said, you guys take care of it and it's yours. And the library, I think, originally said, well, it's just going to be a 5-year project. We're going to do these, and within 5 years, we'll be done. We'll be out of your hair. We were there from the late 60s till 2007.
Wow.
And originally, it was just the vaults. they asked the library, said, well, this building is entirely decked out as a film lab. All the equipment was still there. Everything was in place. They said, do you want the whole building? And they're like, no, we're not going to have the lab in Dayton. The lab's in the Jefferson building in Washington. But something happened. In the late 70s, there was a fire at the Suitland facility that I mentioned.
Oh, wow.
It was not the library. It was not the library's building. It was the National Archives. And exactly as we talked about, the building had not been watched over as closely as it should have. And they were doing some work with hot tools, and the nitric acid gas had built up, and it went. And it went. And the National Archives, now, fortunately, they had preserved this material. The National Archives had been given the entire output of Universal's newsreel, millions of feet of film, and it was stored at Suitland. And that's what went up in the fire, was the negatives to the Universal newsreel. Now, fortunately, they had preserved them, so they are out there and they are available. You can actually order them from the National Archives. But they lost the film, and the next day, they closed the film lab in the Jefferson building, and they had a big meeting, and they said, we're moving the Nitrate Film Lab to Dayton. Now, unfortunately, by that point, the Air Force, which of course does not rest, had repurposed the rest of the building and turned it into offices. So everything was gone except for the vaults. So they had to find another building. So they found an old daycare center that was no longer being used, and that became the film lab. And that opened in the late 70s, well, after 77. I think it was up and running by like 80, 81. Nice. And that was our film lab until 2007 when we closed it.
Wow. Just preservation of buildings is impressive in that time too. The amount of evolved technology from 81 to 2007 had to have been mind-blowing for something that was being used.
You familiar with the film Brazil?
Of course, yeah.
Okay. Well, the Nitrate Film Vaults looked like the office that Sam Lowry works in. The long hallway with the offices cut in half. That's what it looked like. It was a long hallway. It was painted a cheerful blue, and had these huge red ducts, pipes running into each vault that were the fire suppression system. And it had seen better days. It was coming to the end of its days, and by the time we were getting ready to leave, we would have pipes start leaking. We'd have pinholes coming out of pipes and water spraying out into the hallway. And luckily, we never had any film damage by water incursion. But yeah, we did have the air conditioning go out one summer, in which case we had to bring in refrigerated semi-trailers that they put a big piece of wood over one end and cranked up the AC and had its huge hose. Again, the Brazil illusion. Big hoses going down through the vaults, and all the doors were open. It was wild. I look back on that now, and I'm like, man, we were insane. We had these big old Robinson Myers fans going in the hallway. Nothing intrinsically safe whatsoever.
Nope.
Yeah, that wasn't so much of a consideration. The vaults there had big open shelving, and between each set of shelving, there was a board to separate the shelves in case, again, so that the vault wouldn't just if it would go. The boards between the shelving units were solid asbestos.
Oh my gosh.
So we had 100 vaults. Every vault had like 12 big sheets of solid asbestos. And when they had to do some maintenance on the vaults one time, they looked into the asbestos thing and they tested them, and they discovered they were what is referred to as non-friable asbestos. They were solid. So the fibers will not come off of them. So to protect us further, as they did the maintenance on the vaults, they actually took some polyacrylic something and painted the outside edges that were exposed to protect us further. I never had any problem with it, and didn't end up with mesothelioma, so I guess I'm okay. Plenty of other things, I'm sure, but no, the vaults, they were something else. If you want some pictures to show it when run this thing, I would love to. Yeah, I'll find some pictures of the Dayton vaults. They were wow. I still miss that place though, because as awful as the buildings had become, we were such a family there. We were the far-flung gulag of the Library of Congress. We were out in Ohio, and they would send us. We get all the emails about, look what we're doing in the Madison building. Well, okay, fine, whatever.
Cool. Yeah.
But no, we were a little close family, and it's not been like that. That ended when we came to Culpeper. Although a lot of people were still there, it's just not the same vibe. Very different.
Right. Well, and you were there at that original place for what, 22, 23 years? That's a huge amount of time.
1984 to 2007.
Jeez. Yeah, that's a giant chunk of your life.
It's a huge chunk of my life. And here's the reason, because a lot of people go, how did you end up there? Well, I actually have a degree in film production from Wright State University, which now has the Tom Hanks Film Building, which of course we didn't have.
Right.
It always happens after you leave college, everything improved. But while I was going there, because I knew I wanted to get into film. I mean, I've been interested in film since I was like a third grader, so I knew I wanted to do stuff with film. I figured film production, Wright State had two tracks. They had film production or film theory, and I wanted production.
Right.
So I was in there, and one day my professor calls me in and said, hey, how would you like to inspect film for the Library of Congress? Nitrate film for the Library of Congress. I'm like, sure, am I going to go to D.C.? He's like, no, it's over here, Wright-Patterson. So I'm like, okay. So I made an appointment, went over to see it, and there it was. Holy smokes, this has been here all this time.
Yeah.
And, it was not well known. Most people at Wright-Patterson had no idea we were even there. They didn't know about it. Because we didn't advertise it, there was a little sign outside that said Library of Congress, but it didn't say what it was. We really didn't want people to know what was there, just to keep people away. You didn't want people, because we were a protectorate of not only nitrate film, but a lot of stuff that was copyrighted.
Right.
And the Library of Congress is the arbiter of copyright. We care for copyright, so it becomes a very big deal. So yeah, it was not well known that we were there at Wright-Patterson. It became better known as time went by, and the collection started becoming popular.
Right.
Because when I started, there really wasn't home video like there is now. There was no streaming. There was nothing like that. So we were sitting on these 100,000 reels of nitrate film, but we were the only ones really doing anything with them, preserving them for national collection. It was another 10 years before, as video started building up, and especially when DVD came out, and then when streaming services started, that suddenly these old films that had been sitting fallow for decades suddenly became valuable again. And that's when the library started promoting us a little more, and doing stories about us, and paper stories, magazine stories, and the occasional video. We showed up on AMC in the early days of AMC, when they were interested in American movie classics. We were on there a couple times. So yeah, and of course TCM. Because there would be no TCM without us, because we have the bulk of the Turner Nitrate collection there, or here now.
Speaking of home video, there's a lot of stuff that the Library of Congress has to assist with. I actually pulled a few that the library had a big hand in. This is the Pioneers, First Women Filmmakers from Order.
Yes, my colleague, my colleague Lynn Schweigofer and I, we actually did the editorial sort of reconstruction of probably about half of that set. We are so proud of that set. Oh my! On there's two films they're really big. They're both by Lois Weber. The one thing I love about that set is that it has brought out these women filmmakers who are so sadly neglected. I mean, I went to film school and I'd never heard of them. I'd never heard of Lois Weber. I didn't know.
Right.
No idea what a big deal she was. She became such a big deal that she frightened the guys in the business and they pushed her out. And she's a really great filmmaker. I mean, I don't know if have you watched Hypocrites on that set?
Yes. I think I have watched that one.
Yeah, Hypocrites is a really wild allegorical film about the minister who has a dream, and he wakes up as this ascetic monk, and he's climbing the mountain, and then they have the naked truth, who's actually naked. Favorite story of mine on that one. That we were working on Lois Weber for weeks because a lot of her short films are on there. So you work with a certain film director, and you begin to know how they think, which is really cool, because we don't want to. Because one of the dangers with film preservation is trying to think like someone who's been gone for 75 years. And so we got to Hypocrites, and only one print of Hypocrites had survived, and it was in Australia. And the Australian archive sent us a negative made from that print. That print is gone. The original nitrate is gone. And when you see it, you can see that it was going even when they found it. We started working on Hypocrites, and I was really excited because I knew this was a big deal, and it was this wild allegorical thing. So we put it together as we had it, the 4 reels we had. We put them together, and we started watching it. And we're like, this is terrible. this stuff doesn't work at all. It's just weird. What is wrong with this thing? And we're looking at it and we're like, well, maybe we need to, I don't know. The storytelling doesn't work. And there's like things that are obviously supposed to be really important. You're supposed to get,
right.
And it doesn't work. What's wrong with it? And it really bugged us because it was her first feature. It was a major film for her, major allegory, that kind of thing. And so we worked on it for like a week and we're not getting anywhere. So we get to the end of the week and we're like, oh, Monday we'll try again. So I come home and all weekend, that's all I can think about is hypocrites. Like, what is wrong with this film? And so I'm mowing the yard and I'm riding on my mower and I'm putting the film together in my mind and I'm like, why isn't this working? And all of a sudden I'm like, wait a minute. And I'm putting things together in a different order. And I'm like, huh? So I'm glad I didn't drive into the street because I was so excited. We got back Monday and I always remember that. I sit down with Lena and I'm like, okay, I've got this crazy idea. What if we take reel 3 and make it reel 1? And she's like, okay. So we did. We moved the reels. We took the reel that was reel 1 didn't have the opening credits. We took the credits off. We put reel 3 in its place, put the credits back on, started watching it, and it was like, it fell into place. Everything worked. The storytelling was perfect. And everything was in place, and everything was, it's like, we're like, it works. This is a great film now. How do we explain this? Because we just arbitrarily switched 2 reels. So we're like, there's a tool, which you probably have heard of, called Lantern.
Yep.
And so Lantern is we use Lantern all the time. So we went on to Lantern, and we started looking up hypocrites, and we found this one review from like Chicago or something. And we read it, and it had a summary of the film in the exact order we had just put it, every scene.
Oh,
and we're like, oh, yeah. So now we have hypocrites back in order. That was the first thing. We got hypocrites back in order. And then we're like, wait a minute. This film has not been lost. This print has been available for 40 years, and people have seen it. We've lent it out to festivals. Kino has previously released it out of order. Okay? Very famous, important film historians have written about Lois Weber's nonlinear editing style. She's not nonlinear. Her film's out of order.
Right.
And no one ever caught this. I think that's what bothered me most of all. Is like, here's these 2 knuckleheads putting this film together.
Mowing the lawn.
and we, after 40 years, it's back in the right order, and no one ever noticed it. So anyway, we got it back in order. So we're like, okay, so that was the first thing. The second thing was, working on Lois Weber's stuff, we realized from the original material we had, she loved color. All her films, almost all of her original nitrates have tinting in them. And the tinting is also very emotional, has a very strong emotional effect. So we're like, well, she had to do this with hypocrites. This is such a big project. So we wrote to our friends down in Australia, wrote to the archive and said, we know that you had the original print of hypocrites, but we also know that it's gone. Did you guys make a log of the tints that were in the film? And they wrote back and they said, no, we didn't make a tint log, but we did make a color negative. You want to borrow it? We're like, what? So they shipped the color negative up to us from Canberra, and we scanned it, and we had the color negative, and we're like, okay, yeah, there were all the tints, and they're complementary to the scenes. So we went in, and we didn't use that version because ours looked a little better, but we went in and we tinted every sequence in Hypocrites to match what we found. And the color negative, for whatever reason, had an extra scene in it that was missing from the print that we had.
Oh,
geez. It was an extremely important scene. And so we were able to put that back in the film, too. So now Hypocrites is complete. It's in the proper order, and the tints are in place. Wow. And you can see it on that set.
And literally only because it's been archived properly by you and Australia. Yep. And then on top of that, people paying attention, using the resources available to do what the filmmaker intended, which is incredibly important. I mean, that's an incredible journey. It is.
It really is. And it's such a great piece of work. It is just audacious, I think, is a good term for it. It's an audacious film that she had the power to be able to make this film her own way, because it's not, it's not a Hollywood film. It's not a story film. It's a big allegorical fable, and a crazy one at that. It's really, really wild. And the fact that she hired an actress to play the naked truth, who actually was naked, which got them into a lot of trouble in many states, including Ohio.
Right.
I think in Ohio they actually wanted Universal to take the prince and paint clothes on her. But they staged a big showing of the film in Columbus for the Ohio government and the Board of Censors to show them, no, what you're hearing is wrong. Watch the film and you'll see what we're doing. And they showed the film, and the censorship board and the state government went, "It's great, go ahead." And so it was able to be shown in Ohio, which was pretty amazing for the time.
That's awesome. One more from that I want to share, and also to highlight something upcoming, the Pioneers of African American Cinema, one that you also worked on, but also the Oscar Michaud collection just got announced from Kino coming, that has some from this and some added items that have been further restored and found since then, I believe.
Yes. What is the Notorious Eleanor Lee, I think, is going to be the big one on that, because that's one of his talkies, and the only surviving print had terrible sound. It was almost unintelligible, and I'm not sure what the process is they use. They use some fancy new gewgaws and digital whatnot, and have brought the soundtrack up to where you can actually understand what everybody's saying now, which is, I think that's going to be a big one, because not a whole lot of his films have survived, and sadly, because Michaud kind of was on his own, didn't have the support of any studio, so he had to do what he could and get the material and the equipment that he could scrounge up and do. His films weren't always the best of quality.
Right.
But utterly fascinating. And as are the ones in that set, the original box set. There's some amazing films in there that came from, I think most of those actually came from us. Those two sets you're showing there, those are two of our biggest ones that we're really proud of. We have another one that's going to be coming out from Kino in first quarter of 2025, which is a series of silent dog movies, all films featuring dogs.
Amazing.
Again, Lynn Ann and I worked on this one, and this one was one that our curator kind of gave us a long leash. And
what a great pun, George. Loves it.
Everyone knows Rin Tin Tin. They know the name Rin Tin Tin, but he was just one. There were so many dog stars, and so we've tried to find representative films of like Braveheart and Lightning and Gene the Vitagraph dog, and a bunch of others. And then others that the dogs are not named, but the dog is very, very important. We even uncovered in our thing, one of our favorite ones is only about a minute too long, but it's an early comedy which is believed to have been directed by Alice Guy Blaché, that features dogs relieving themselves on a flower. And that's all I'll say about that. But there are some wonderful films there, and the big one on that we did a lot of work on was a previously lost Tom Mix film called Teeth, which was one he did for Fox, which amazingly we could not find any material on. We found a few reviews, and we found the book that it was based on, but it was missing. At least one reel of the film was missing, so we had to rebuild that missing reel, and it was tough because we had nothing to go on. We had no stills. We couldn't even use production stills. There weren't any. Amazingly enough, this is sort of something that had never happened before. We because it was put out by Fox, the Fox archive is now part of the Walt Disney Company because they bought 20th Century Fox. So we went to them and we said, "Do you guys have anything on the Fox film Teeth?" And they went through and they found that they had a series of lobby cards, and they sent us really nice scans of lobby cards. Unfortunately, the lobby cards were all stuff that we had. They were all scenes that are in the film already. But they also had the original musical cue sheet for the film. Basically, here's the music that should be played throughout the feature. So when it came time to do the score for the film, one of our musical colleagues, Dr. Andrew Simpson, who works up at Catholic University in D.C., often comes down and accompanies our silent film shows. He got the opportunity to create the score for Teeth. And I asked him, I said, would you feel comfortable doing the score from the original cue sheet? He's like, yeah. Oh, that'd be great. And he did. And it turned out that was one of the toughest scores he's ever had to do, because he gets 8 bars and then he has to fill out the other whatever. And in fact, when this set comes out, there is going to be a special extra feature of him talking about creating the score for Teeth. And I've heard the score, and I've seen it with the film. It's amazing. It's one of the best things he's ever done. And it's so cool because now people not only get to see the film restored, but they'll be able to actually hear the music that was intended to be played with the film.
Wow.
And Teeth is an interesting film. It's going to be very polarizing for people because the opening 5 minutes of it really set up the dynamics of the villain. And it's a hard scene to watch. That's all I'll say about that. It was tough for us to work on that opening, but we knew where the director was going with it, and we knew it had to be the way it is. So there you go. Watch for it. Coming out at the beginning of 2025. It's gonna be great.
The last one that I wanted to hold up from Kino, that this might be my favorite, that Library of Congress has their name on from Kino. Cinema's First Nasty Women. This is an incredible box set. So glad that we got this. Any interesting behind the stories on this one?
The only one I think that I worked on in that one was I don't remember the title, but there's one feature on there. It's a wonderful feature directed by Oscar Apfel, and it's about a girl who lives with her father, and she's kind of a tomboy, and it's her adventures of kind of, I think her father dies, and she has to go into the city and stuff like that. And we had to put it back together from, what was it, a 28 millimeter print, I think. I think we had a 28 and a 35. We had to recombine the two or do some other things to it. But it's a really wonderful, forgotten little film from a really good director who in his later days, when he quit directing, he became a character actor. I believe he's in a lot of films in the 30s. Oscar Apfel, when he decided to give up the director's chair. But yeah, that set, that's the one set I do not have that one. I have to bug them about getting that one. I think they gave us one copy of it.
Oh, geez.
There was a good old days when, they would just send us copies of things. But
right.
That's long gone now, so we don't expect them anymore. But it is nice to see these things coming out. And there's lots of other things. We just did one this year on Vinegar comedies that was very successful. That was fun. That was fun to work on. And that there was a couple of, again, there was a female star in that one, Edith Story, who I only heard about, but the two films we put in there of hers are just delightful. And of course also the Sidney Drew comedies that we got to work on. Sidney Drew is, and there is, hopefully we started talking about it and it'll come sometime. There's talk of working further on another Sidney Drew set of the film he and his wife did for Metro, because they are priceless. They are so fun. And again, he's a man who needs to be rediscovered because, his family is still working to this day. Where Drew Barrymore got her first name.
Right. That's, wow. Okay. So one thing that I know a lot of people are going to wonder about, and I'm sure that you've talked about this multiple times before, funding. Everything that you do takes a ton of money, period. Like being able to archive these, being able to restore film, but even just being able to preserve film properly, it takes a ton of money. And when you're called the Library of Congress, people are wondering, am I paying for you to be able to store film, and why? How does that work on your end?
From what I understand, and I'm no expert on it, but I know that, since we're the Library of Congress, we get a yearly budget. We have a budget. Our division has a budget, and the librarian needs to go before Congress every year and basically tell them why we need this budget and what the money is going to be spent for and where the money is being allocated. And of course, most of the money goes to people. What is it we get every 2 weeks? A paycheck. This is salaries.
Overhead, we'll call it.
We have a lot of money is spent on digital equipment now. That's the newest thing. We still have a film lab, a photochemical film lab that has to be taken care of. Although that is becoming more boutique. Film stock is so expensive, and frankly, most of our clients are now asking for digital. So we are scanning. The ratio is probably 10-1 scanning to photochem. We still are doing photochem because there are enough people out there who still want to show 35 millimeter prints. So, but they're, like I said, they're few and far between, and a lot of times they're very special films that are getting done. Although one of the ones, and I'm so happy we now have this, and it'll start showing up at festivals, I'm sure. We did a brand new print of a really great Michael Curtiz film, The Walking Dead, with Boris Karloff, which actually just Warner Archive just put out on 4K.
Yep.
But they made a new 35 millimeter print of this, and I got to see some of it a few weeks ago, and it's just spectacular. And it's Curtiz, so it's great, and it's Karloff, and it's one of Karloff's best performances. He gets to really, really act in it. You get to hear that wonderful voice. He doesn't just have to grunt. But yeah, I mean, the money. There's a lot of money. We have a fairly large budget for our division, and it's, like I said, it's spread out. Not only with moving image, we also have recorded sound. We also have video. We have presentation, et cetera, et cetera. And right now we're on a continuing resolution because we do not have a budget. They have not signed off on a budget, and our money is good until December 20th. They have to come up with either have to come up with a budget or a further continuing resolution, or we close, which is always an interesting situation. But yeah, the nice thing is that Congress takes care of the Library of Congress. It's one of their most valuable tools for information. I mean, that was the original purpose of the Library of Congress, was as a way for congressmen to have research done on projects that they needed to discuss or work on without them having to do that research themselves. They would get experts. I need to know about corn being grown in Iowa over the past 25 years. And then they'll go and they will find that kind of information. In fact, one of the largest, if not the largest part of the Library of Congress is called CRS, the Congressional Research Service. And that's what they do. That they field questions from members of Congress daily about everything. So Congress is going to, as well as they can, they're going to protect the Library of Congress. And yes, it is federal tax money that goes to do the work we do.
Right.
But why wouldn't you want that? I mean,
exactly.
We do want to preserve our national heritage, and I think I feel we're doing a really good service. And we're now making the stuff available. The internet and streaming services have allowed us to present things that we have preserved. I mean, for so many years, we were preserving stuff and then putting it in another vault, and there it sat. There wasn't any outlet for it. Now we've got outlets. There's the National Screening Room. If you go up to the library's website, there are several hundred films, features, and shorts that are available to watch, and most of them can actually be downloaded in high quality versions that you own, that are yours, and you can actually do whatever you want to with them because they're all public domain too. So that's one thing. Recorded sound has a lot of stuff available up there. A lot of it cannot be downloaded because a lot of it still has rights associated with it, but the rights holders have allowed us to create the National Jukebox, and there are thousands, if not tens of thousands, of early recordings up there that can be listened. You can create playlists and whatnot. So yeah, I think our services are very much needed. One of my guiding principles has always been what George Santayana said: "Those who do not remember history are doomed to repeat it." So I'm doing my part to make sure that everyone knows what our history is. So if they screw it up, it's not my fault.
Well, and a big part of this literally is the educational side. There's so much of this that is just, I mean, even if we break down just your small sector of the giant Library of Congress, just teaching people about preserving this is incredibly important. And so it should be something you should be happy about, tiny bit of tax dollars going to that.
Yeah, really. It really is. There is so much out there, not just for entertainment value, but I think, because that's a big thing about film preservation. We're preserving Star Wars, and we're preserving, the films of Nicholas Ray, and it's great. I'm loving that so many of these Hollywood classics are being preserved. But the nice thing about the library, and this is kind of unusual as far as National Archives go, because we have this yearly budget, we are able to preserve material that nobody else can because we do it as part of our budget. So we can preserve, we have this really fascinating film about drill presses. Not a whole lot of people are going to want to watch it, but it shows the process of how these drill presses run. It shows the machinery that created them. It shows people in their daily work, and we preserve it. We have a lot of films that were created in small towns where this guy would come in with his camera and say, "I'm going to make a movie of you guys, and we'll show it at the end of the week," and then he gets some money for it. So, we have 2 films about Wooster, Ohio, a silent one and a sound one, and all they are is basically, here's Wooster, and they show everybody in Wooster. People they're going shopping, they're going to the schools, they show Wooster Brush, which is this huge company that's still there, And Worcester was really proud of this because one of them is almost an hour long. It's one of the longest of these itinerant films I've ever seen. We have several episodes of The Kidnapper's Foil, which was this sort of infamous series. This fellow would go into town and he would get all the kids, had the parents bring all their kids, and he had this story about this little girl being kidnapped and the kids going and rescuing her, sort of an Our Gang kind of thing. And, you know, and they're not good films. They're not well made, really, but they're charming. And again, you see real people in their daily work clothes, and you get to see the towns and that kind of thing. And it's so much fun because we have 4 or 5 of these now. I have more than that. And they all have exactly the same script. So it's so much fun to see these different groups of kids all doing exactly the same story in different parts of the country.
Right.
You know? So again, those are preserved, and a lot of places would not be able to do that just because so many archives, because they don't have a big, not funded, the money they get comes from endowments. They have to come up with something that they can get their money back out of. Yep. They can flog. We don't necessarily have to do that. So we are able to preserve these things that go into the system, and now they're available for people to see. The others, they can't even think about doing that. It's just does not make sense for them financially.
Well, even not only can they not think about that, for like on your end, aren't there laws about you getting funding and like fundraising and selling things and all of that?
Yeah, the Library of Congress does not sell any DVDs ourselves. All those, that's why Kino, we have a relationship with Kino and Criterion, and Ben Modell's Undercrank Productions is one of our big clients.
Yep, Ben is great.
And our former curator, Rob Stone, has a company, Split Reel, and they're working on the first DVD set coming from them. So yeah, and there's a lot of other people. There are so many other people who are buying our material to put out, and that's the way it should be. We just can't do it because the library is not allowed to make money. We're not allowed to make money because we are federally funded.
Right. So one of the things that, especially for things that are important, like the Library of Congress, which feels so dumb to say it just that elementary way, one of the things that I always try to focus on is how do we best support you? And obviously this is a different situation because most of us can't walk up and put $5 under the door in Virginia. But what I'm hearing, and please tell me if this is correct, anytime that you see Library of Congress branding or a boutique announces that it's in partnership with the Library of Congress, support the hell out of that release, because then that shows that you want more of that, and that means those companies will support you more.
Yeah. To get the Library of Congress branding on there, the company has to do certain things with the library. They have the paperwork and the contracts they need to sign to be able to do that. So yeah, so actually going together with the library on a project is a really big deal. And it's worked out really well for both concerns. I think most of the Library of Congress things that have been put out have been fairly successful.
And they're big deals.
A lot of the stuff we have, you're not going to find anywhere else.
Right. Especially, I mean, like we just talked about, the updated versions that's coming in, like the Michaud collection, it literally updated for that collection. You're not going to be able to see that on the old Blu-rays. You're not going to be able to see that in DVDs from 25 years ago.
And you just made me think of one that is out. I don't actually know if it is out yet, but it is coming out soon from VCI. And it was not done with us, but it was material that we stored. There is a new Blu-ray coming out of the King Vidor film Street Scene.
Oh, yeah.
Street Scene fell into public domain very early on and has been available for years. Oh, terrible. Just wretched looking, poor sound, poor picture quality. The Mary Pickford Company owned the surviving nitrate on that. It actually came to them. There was a company called Art Cinema, I believe. And they did some very major early talkies, and then they went bankrupt during the Depression. And because they released through United Artists, and they were, I think, on the hook to United Artists for some of their production costs, the materials then transferred to UA when they went out of business, and then UA separated the assets amongst the different members. So Mary Pickford, one of the things she got was Street Scene. So we've had that for years. And about maybe 30 years ago, we did a photochemical version of Street Scene that can be borrowed for shows. When BCI got a contract with Pickford to do projects with them, I had gotten to know the owner of BCI, and I said, hey, we've got this beautiful material on Street Scene. You should do Street Scene. and he kind of looked into it and decided to do it. And I will tell you, it is one of the most beautiful Blu-rays I have ever seen. You have never seen Street Scene look like this. It is so beautiful. The sound is all clean on it. It's a really great movie too. It's one of King Vidor's best, I think. And to add to that, when they reissued Street Scene in the late 30s, this company called Atlantic Pictures put it out. They cut the original titles off and put their own titles on it. So the original title sequence has been missing. Now, normally it wouldn't be a big deal, but Alfred Newman wrote this wonderful music for Street Scene, which it gets played in concert all the time, like the Street Scene Overture. And he wrote the music, and it is synchronized to the opening of the film.
Wow.
The opening of the titles to when the film actually starts and the music stops, it's synchronized to the action. Well, when Atlantic took the titles off, they didn't think about that, so it threw everything out. Threw everything off. So when they borrowed the material for Street Scene, I said, now you got to make sure you need to borrow this material because it's got the original titles on it. You want the original titles. So when they sent a copy of that out, or they actually sent a digital look-see because they were asking us how it was supposed to look. There they were, the original opening credits, and it just makes it all the better, And like I said, this film will now finally, after all these years, get seen in the light that it needs to be seen in, and the beauty of it, because King Vidor was such a fascinating director, and definitely put a difficult situation on himself because the Street Scene was a stage play that takes place on one set. And so he tried to keep true to that, but again, it's a movie, so you got to do a little more. So they built this amazing, humongous set of this building. And it's a pretty potent piece of cinema because it's pre-code, so people are allowed to say and do things, and the level of sort of sexuality and just out-and-out nastiness of some of the people. I mean, they're very human. And the biggest surprise, and a lot of the people from the Broadway production are in the film playing their same characters.
Nice.
What's her name? Who plays Jimmy Stewart's mother in It's a Wonderful Life? Can't remember her name right now. But she's one of the main characters in Street Scene, and she's just the nastiest creature you've ever seen. She's really dreadful. She just talks off the top of her head. Is
it Sylvia Sidney or Estelle Taylor?
Sidney is sort of the young lead in this one, but this is I can't remember.
So Estelle Taylor, maybe?
Nope. No.
Beulah Bondi?
Yes, Beulah Bondi. She's wonderful. She's absolutely amazing because you see her you see a little bit of this in like the dream sequence in It's a Wonderful Life when she's like, the running the boarding house, and she's like, "What are you talking about?" Just think of that character magnified like 100 times. That's the character she plays in Street Scene. I mean, so it's one shot in particular, and this is because a lot of times Vidor will put his camera low to look up at people looking out of the windows of talking out of the windows of the apartment building. And there is one shot where Beulah Bondi is standing there, and her backside is really prominent, and she's scratching it, and it's very human. But it's not something you would see a couple years later,
Right.
So I highly recommend. Like I said, I'm not sure if Street Scene is out yet.
It is. Came out July 9th of this year. Came out good. 5 months ago.
Grab it. It's amazing.
The Mary Pickford collection. Are you working with them on the VCI stuff on most of their Mary Pickford items?
No. Well, off and on. The biggest one we did was Joanna in Lists. Joanna in Lists. Joanna in Lists was a big one. That was one where we had to replace half of Reel 3 because it was missing. It had been missing since the 40s. And so that was a big one. We did that one. What else? We supplied material for... I hate getting old. I can't remember any of these titles now. But
you've got way more than me going on. This is impressive.
It's the one where she's an orphanage in the swamp, and she's taking care of all the little kids. And it's Gustav von Seifertitz is the bad guy who runs the orphanage. Sparrows. Yeah, they used our material for Sparrows. I highly recommend that one too. That's quite a beautiful.
The only reason I ask is because their release of The Love Light comes out just next week.
I don't think that's one of ours. I don't think Love Light is one of ours. I didn't have anything.
Good to know. George, this has been astounding. I could probably ask you very specific questions for the next 5 hours, but I desperately want to be very kind to your time.
Thank you.
I love, the amount of passion behind all this. One last thing for everybody.
Sure.
Through all of your interviews, through the stories, through the documentary I mentioned earlier, that please, again, go watch that in the description below. There's one thing that sticks out to me, and that is the idea of film preservation itself as this idea that we look back on, no matter what era you're discussing, the individual looks back on and say, man, how did those people just let those films go? And the only thing that kills me is we are all those people for the next era looking back. Mm-hmm. So what else can we do right now, in your opinion, to make those people proud of how we are preserving film and not losing more than we should be? And not just Library of Congress, but everybody that supports you, everybody that you support in your resource chain, everybody that is a part of these boutique industries that are doing great work on restoring film, just overall, film in general. How do we as a society focus on that?
I think it's important for everyone to find the films they love and support them. I mean, buy them, and don't buy streaming copies. Excuse me, I have someone here who's wanting to say hello. Streaming is great, but I think physical media is still. I mean, I'm still a physical media person, and support all the people who are doing, all of the colleagues I have out there who are doing these GoFundMes and different things. Support them. That's the way a lot of this stuff is going to come out, because like I said, we have 154,000 reels of nitrate film. We can't do all of them, but if somebody has a certain desire to see a film come out, support those projects and go to film festivals and be part of it, and and talk about it. Start a film club in your neighborhood and watch these old movies, and I think even more important, because I know I'm doing this. I have a 10-year-old son, and I am very happy to say that there's more often than not he'll come to me and say, "Dad, can we watch Laurel and Hardy?" And I'm like, "You bet we can." I'm trying to make sure that he understands the importance of these films and why we need to have this stuff and why it needs to be preserved. And he knows what I do, because I go and do it every day. And he's come to our theater and to see things. That's one other thing I should mention really quick. One of our outreaches is we have a theater in the building here in Culpeper, and we show movies every weekend except for holidays. This weekend we're showing The Phantom Carriage, The Apartment, and The French Connection. And I think those might all
pretty decent lineup, by the way.
And our Christmas offerings this year are White Christmas and It's a Wonderful Life. And they're both important because, first, they're both 35mm prints. The White Christmas is an original Technicolor print from the original release. Most beautiful thing I've ever seen. It's a Wonderful Life is a new print that was made off the original negative. So you will never see a better looking copy of It's a Wonderful Life. So those are at the end of December. I don't know when this is going to come out, so it may already be passed by the time it's coming. But
I will do my best to get it out before then.
Every weekend we have all sorts of different stuff we're showing. We try to show 35mm when we can, because that's a lot of people think that's really cool, and it's something that just doesn't happen anymore. There are no theaters in this area between here and Washington. I don't know how many theaters can still show film.
Right. Wow.
But yeah, I think the thing is just get out there and people who, all of you out there who love these old films, share them, get them out, force your friends to see them. Don't let them get away. It's black and white. It's violent. No, that's not an excuse anymore.
Especially when many of these, I mean, I can understand people that are between 35 and 55 when they were younger, that the black and white was not pristine looking. It was much worse. So many of these now, I get them and I'm just astonished that they look better than anything you've ever seen before.
Yeah, I mean, now I'm seeing things, and I find myself saying this more often than not. It's like, I never thought I'd get to see that.
Right.
I never thought I'd get to see classic 3D films in my living room in 3D. I never thought I'd see the Cinerama films put back together.
Yeah.
It just constantly, there's this stuff that's showing up and coming out. It just blows my mind.
Amazing.
And it's really cool to have been part of that too. I mean, I'm really bad at tooting my own horn. And one of the things about working in the Library of Congress that's really interesting is I don't take credit for any of this work. My name, if you see my name on there, that was put on there by the producer or something else. I do not take credit for this. I don't feel I can. They're not my films. I'm just doing the work to put them back together and get them out there.
And it's literally your job.
It's my job, yeah. And I love my job, So it's exciting. I think that's one of the most fulfilling things about it is these wonderful films that no one has been able to see, like Hypocrites. Hypocrites is an incredible piece of work that was unavailable for years, and now people can watch it. They can see it. The Edison Frankenstein is on the Library of Congress website. It's gorgeous. We did a beautiful scan of it, and we got the original opening titles from the Edison site up in West Orange, and it's got an incredible Donald Sozin score on it. Wow. It's something else to see now. And again, it's one of those things that was fabled, not lost, but lost in plain sight, and the copies that were out there were just dreadful. Now you can actually see Charles Ogle's face. Amazing. And the incredible makeup, the kabuki makeup that he did for his monster. So that was a big one for us, too.
Well, again, George, I don't even know how to say thank you enough. This is a huge deal for me as somebody that loves film, as somebody that's a federal employee. Being able to talk to somebody from Library of Congress is really cool. But also, shout out to Oscar Behcer, who gave the introduction. I want to point out that he calls you the king of all film archivists, and I would say that you have lived up to it. So thank you so much for your time.
Oh, no, I'm embarrassed. No, I thank you. It's a pleasure and an honor doing this work. I really, really enjoy it. Hope to do it for another few years. I'm not. That is
the hope for all of us to see your work. All right, sir. Hopefully we can get a chance to do this again someday. So thank you.
Indeed, I'm available. Just give me a call anytime. We'll talk.
Thank you for listening to the Disconnected Podcast. There's one big thing that you could do to help the show, and that is to leave a rating and review on the podcast service of your choice. Thank you.
Hello and welcome to Tumbleweeds and TV Cowboys. My name is Hunter. In this podcast, I'll be joined by a different guest each week to discuss a classic Western movie or TV show. I've been a fan of classic Westerns for as long as I can remember, and in recent years, they've become very nostalgic for me. I love the aesthetic, the tropes, and I love seeing different filmmakers' takes on them. At their best, they're incredibly entertaining, rewatchable, and some of my all-time favorite movies are Westerns. We'll mostly focus on Western movies made in Hollywood, but we'll also be covering spaghetti Westerns, and one thing I'm very excited to get into are Western TV shows. I've got some amazing guests coming on the show, film professors, historians, and podcasters. And Tumbleweeds and TV Cowboys is part of the Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network, and many guests on the show will be from other shows on the network. Thanks for listening.
Thank you for listening. To hear more shows from the Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network, please select the link in the description